The twin moons of Valoria hung low in the sky, shining like two silver eyes watching every corner of the empire. Inside the grand palace, long golden lamps burned, lighting the wide halls and tall archways. Soft music played in the distance, but the air was heavy with fear, not joy. Tonight, the royal council gathered again for a ceremony that everyone already knew would fail. For 10 long years, no suitor had passed the princess bonding trial. No one. Because of one rule that frightened the whole galaxy. No one was allowed to bond with the princess until they saw her real face. But she never removed her mask. The princess of Valoria always wore a shining silver mask that covered her from forehead to chin. Not even the royal council, not even her closest attendants, had seen her true face since she was a child. Rumors spread across galaxies. Some said she was cursed. Some said her face carried a mark of destruction. Others whispered that she was not fully Valorian, that her blood carried a strange light. Many believed that one look at her face would break a person's spirit, and so no one dared. Suitor after suitor failed. Kingdom after kingdom withdrew their offers. The empire grew weaker and weaker. If the princess did not bond soon, the throne would fall into chaos. War would come. Enemies were already waiting in the shadows. Tonight another suitor, a noble from the crystal colonies, had come. He stood before the princess, sweating under the bright hall lights. The royal council watched from their high seats. His hands shook as the princess stepped forward, her silver mask shining like a moon. The council elder announced, the suitor must choose. A bond before the mask, or no bond at all. Silence filled the room. The noble looked up at the princess, then quickly looked away. Fear crawled through him. I cannot, the noble whispered, stepping back. Gasps filled the hall. Another failure. The princess lowered her head. For years she had heard those same words. Each one was a blade in her heart. She turned to leave the hall quietly, her long silver gown brushing against the marble floor. But before she could exit, a loud sound echoed through the palace, metal scraping, engines failing. The whole building shook. Guards rushed toward the windows. A strange ship was falling from the sky, a human ship. Within moments, the ship crashed outside the palace gates in a burst of blue sparks. Smoke rose high. Soldiers ran to secure the site. Everyone expected danger. Instead, the palace doors opened again, and an unfamiliar figure walked inside, a tall, tired human man with rough clothes and grease on his hands. He looked confused, not dangerous at all. His name was Evan Hale, a simple trader whose ship engine had exploded mid-flight. He only entered to ask for help, but he stepped into a ceremony he did not understand. What place is this? Evan asked, wiping dust from his jacket. The council stared at him like he was an intruder. The guards raised their weapons. But Evan didn't seem scared. He looked around calmly, then his eyes landed on the princess with her shining mask. He raised his eyebrows. Why is she wearing a mask at a ceremony? No one ever dared to ask that question. The hall froze. A council member hissed, "Human, show respect." No one questions the mask. Evan shrugged. I'm just asking. A person is more than a mask, right? The hall reacted like he had shouted something dangerous. People leaned away from him. Some murmured. Others glared. The princess stood very still. Her heart began to beat faster. She had never heard anyone speak such honest, simple words without fear. Evan looked around again. I don't understand. Why does her face matter so much? Shouldn't you know her heart first? The council elder slammed his staff on the floor. Enough, human, you insult our customs. But the princess did not look insulted. She looked shaken. Her fingers trembled inside her sleeves. Someone had finally spoken words she had wished to hear for years. Someone who did not tremble at the sight of her mask. Someone who spoke with gentle truth, not with fear. She looked at the human again. Why was he not afraid? Evan took a small step forward. Look, I didn't mean trouble. I only need help fixing my ship. Instead of anger, the princess felt something warm. Something dangerous. Something she had never felt before. Curiosity. And a whisper formed in her mind. Who is this human who speaks without fear of me? The royal council wasted no time ordering the guards to escort Evan Hawley to the guest holding quarters. They claimed it was for security reasons, but everyone knew the truth. They did not trust a human who spoke so freely, without fear, without bowing. Humans were rare visitors on Valoria, and even rarer inside the palace. Evan walked calmly beside 2 armored guards. His steps echoed through the long marble hallway, but his eyes wandered everywhere. Tall crystal pillars glowed blue, silver curtains floated gently, and strange holographic symbols shifted along the walls. Even with guards watching him, he seemed more curious than scared. Do all your buildings shine like this? Evan asked casually. The guards stiffened. They were not used to simple questions. No one talked freely in the palace halls. But Evan did. Finally, one guard muttered, "Silence. You are in the royal palace." Evan raised his hands and laughed softly. All right. No talking. Got it. But even as the guards led him away, he couldn't forget the masked princess. There was something sad in the way she stood, something lonely behind that silver mask. Her eyes, though hidden, felt heavy, like she carried mountains on her shoulders. Inside her chamber, the princess felt the same weight. She sat near her long window, watching the moons reflect on the garden ponds below. But her thoughts were not on the beauty of the night. They were on the human. She had met hundreds of suitors, from powerful worlds. All of them bowed, shook, trembled, and stepped away the moment they remembered the rule about her mask. But the human, he did not bow. He did not fear. He did not whisper. He simply spoke like she was a person. No one had spoken to her like that since she was a child. Her heart beat faster. She had never felt this before, warm curiosity mixed with fear that felt almost pleasant. She whispered into the empty room, "Why did he not fear me?" She stared at her reflection in the silver mask. Her hand rose slowly to touch it. The cold metal pressed against her fingers. It had been her shield, her prison, her curse. Every day she wished someone could see her without panic. But no one dared accept him. A sudden thought pushed into her mind. What if she spoke to him again? Not as a princess. Not as someone cursed. Just as someone. Before she could stop herself, she stood up, wrapped her long cloak around her shoulders, and slipped out of her chamber through a hidden passage she used only when she wanted to be unseen. The palace at night was quiet. Only a few floating lanterns glowed softly in the hallways. The princess moved like a shadow, her cloak blending into the darkness. Evan sat inside a quiet room where the guards had placed him. It was luxurious tall bed, floating lights, soft couches, but he didn't care. He sat on the floor, fixing a small metal part from his ship that had snapped off in the crash. He didn't expect anyone to visit him tonight. So when the door opened with a soft click, he looked up in surprise. A figure stepped inside wearing a long dark cloak and the same silver mask. She closed the door behind her and took a small breath, as if preparing for something important. Evan blinked. "You're the princess, right?" She froze. "How did you know?" Evan smiled a little. Only royalty walks like that, with quiet footsteps but strong presence. The princess didn't know what to say. No one ever spoke to her like that. She slowly moved closer, her voice soft and unsure. "Why did you speak such words in the hall? Why did you say a mask does not matter?" He shrugged. "Because it doesn't." The princess felt her heartbeat jump. She sat across from him, still keeping distance, still hiding behind the mask. "People fear my face," she whispered. "They believe I am." "Cursed," Evan frowned. "Are you cursed?" "No, she said quickly, a hint of pain in her voice. But they believe it. Then it doesn't matter, Evan said simply. The princess stared at him. His simple words felt strange, like new light in a dark room. She wanted to ask more, but she feared she was staying too long. She stood up to leave, but before she reached the door, Evan asked softly, "Why do you hide from your own people?" She stopped. Her hand trembled on the door handle. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Without another word, she slipped out into the hallway. Her cloak swirling behind her like a shadow in the moonlight. Evan watched the door close gently. He whispered to himself, "Why would someone fear showing their own face?" And somewhere deep inside the palace, the princess whispered the exact same words. Why was he not afraid of me? The palace was calm on the outside, but deep within its walls, tension spread like a slow fire. The princess moved quickly through the hidden passageways, her heart beating too fast after her forbidden meeting with the human. She kept her cloak tight around her, afraid someone had seen her leave Evan's quarters. When she reached her private chamber again, she closed the secret panel behind her and let out a long breath. She stood still in the silence, listening with fear that someone might knock on her door. But the corridor outside remained quiet. Still, she knew the risk she had taken. If the council found out she had visited a human alone, if the nobles discovered she broke the sacred rules, if anyone saw her walking without guards, it would create chaos. But she could not stop thinking about him, his calm voice, his simple words, his strange courage. Meanwhile, in the darker side of the palace, where the lanterns glowed red instead of blue, a group of nobles gathered in a narrow room behind a curtain of black silk. This was not a meeting of friends or loyal servants. These were men and women who wanted the throne for themselves. Tonight, they whispered about the human. "He should not be here," one noble said, slamming his hand on the table. "He disrupts the order," another hissed. "The princess has weak mind. She might listen to him." A tall woman with sharp eyes leaned forward. "If she bonds with that human, the throne will remain with her, and we lose everything." They all nodded. They had spent years spreading fear about the princess's curse, years making sure no suitor dared to look past her mask, years strengthening their hidden power. They needed her bond to fail. But now, the woman whispered, a stranger arrives. A human who sees the princess as more than a mask. And he must be removed, another said coldly. At the same time, Evan Hale had no idea he had become the center of a dangerous storm. He sat in the palace courtyard the next morning, looking up at the sky while waiting for news about his ship repairs. Valoria's morning light was soft, and strange purple birds sang near the silver trees. Evan loved peace here. He never liked royal places, but this garden felt different, quiet, almost magical. A palace worker approached him. "Human, the council wishes to examine your ship's damage. They say repairs may take time." Evan gave a small smile. "Fine by me. I'm not in a rush." But the worker leaned closer and whispered, "Be careful. Not everyone wants you here." Before Evan could ask anything, the worker hurried away. Evan frowned. What did that mean? He didn't get an answer. Instead, 2 royal guards appeared from behind a large crystal fountain. They walked straight toward him. "The council summons you," one guard announced. "Now?" Evan asked. "Yes." Evan stood, dusted off his jacket, and followed them. They didn't take him to the council chamber like he expected. Instead, they turned into a lower hallway filled with large columns and heavy shadows. Strange place for a council meeting, Evan said. Neither guard replied. But they didn't know that someone else watched from above, on a high balcony. Hidden behind pale curtains, the princess stood silently. She had risen early, unable to sleep. Her mind replayed her secret meeting with Evan again and again. She worried what the council would do when they learned he had spoken freely in the hall. She worried even more about her own feelings she had never experienced. When she saw the guards leading the humans somewhere unusual, her heart tightened. That hallway, that path, she knew it well. It led to the Chamber of Discipline, a place used to punish those who disobeyed royal law. The princess stepped back in shock. No, why are they taking him there? She pressed her hand against the balcony rail, her fingers trembling. The guards did not have permission to harm Evan. No one was allowed to touch a guest. But the nobles who wanted the throne were powerful, and they loved breaking rules in shadows. Fear crawled into her chest. She could not let him be punished for speaking honestly. She pulled her long cloak around her and slipped into another hidden passageway. Her steps fast and silent. She would not let the human face danger alone. The hidden passage walls seemed to close around the princess as she hurried through them. Her cloak brushed against the crystal stones, and her heartbeat echoed louder than her footsteps. She had never moved this fast through the secret tunnels before. She wasn't supposed to. These paths were only for escape during emergencies. But right now, the human was the emergency dot. She reached a narrow slit in the wall that allowed her to look into the Chamber of Discipline. She pressed one eye to the tiny opening and saw Evan standing in the middle of the room. He looked calm, but confused. 2 guards stood behind him, hands tight on their weapons. 3 nobles, the same group whispering in the shadows the night before, stood in front of him with cold expressions. "You speak too freely in our halls," the tall noblewoman said, her voice sharp as a blade. Evan raised an eyebrow. "Is talking a crime here?" "You questioned our customs," another noble hissed. "You insulted the princess." Evan laughed softly. "I didn't insult anyone. I only said a mask doesn't define a person." The nobles did not like this even more. The tall woman leaned forward. "Humans don't understand our ways. Your presence is a danger. You will be escorted out of the Empire at dawn." Evan shrugged. "If you want me to go, fine. But first tell me why you're so afraid of your own princess's face." Gasps filled the room. Even the guards looked nervous. The princess, watching through the wall, felt her heart stop. He was defending her again, even while surrounded by people who wanted to hurt him. Evan continued calmly. "You treat her face like a weapon. But she's a person. Why fear her?" The nobles shook with anger now. Their plan had been simple: scare the human, break his spirit, throw him out quietly. But he was not afraid. He didn't tremble. He didn't bow. He didn't apologize. He stood like a mountain. And that made him dangerous to them. "Human," the tall noblewoman whispered, "you do not belong near the princess. You will cause her downfall." Evan crossed his arms. "Or maybe I'll help her stand." The princess felt something warm fill her chest. No one had ever spoken that way for her, not even family. Suddenly, one noble stepped forward and struck Evan across the face with the back of his hand. The princess gasped silently. Gripping the stone wall, Evan took a step, steadying himself. He touched his cheek where the blow landed, then lifted his head and smiled. A slow, dangerous smile. "Is that supposed to scare me?" he asked quietly. Humans were from death worlds. Their bones were denser. Their bodies were tougher. A simple slap meant nothing. But the nobles didn't know that. Instead of scaring him, they had exposed their own weakness. "Enough!" the noblewoman shouted. "Guards," but she never finished, because at that exact moment, the princess burst into the chamber. The silver doors flew open with a loud crash. Her cloak swirled behind her like a storm. The guards dropped their weapons in shock. The nobles stumbled back. A princess of Valoria did not enter the Chamber of Discipline, ever, "Leave him," she commanded, her voice shaking with anger. Evan blinked in surprise. "Princess? What are you doing here?" She ignored him. She stepped forward until she stood between him and the nobles. She was trembling, but she did not step back. "You have broken the law," she told the nobles, her voice low but strong. "No guest may be harmed inside the palace." The nobles looked terrified. They had never seen her angry. She had always been quiet, soft, calm. But tonight, the fire in her voice made even the guards step aside. "He insulted you," the tall noble woman argued weakly. "He did not," the princess said sharply. "He spoke truth. Something none of you have dared to do." Evan watched her amazed. She wasn't hiding behind guards or laws. She was standing in front of him like a shield. "Princess," he said softly, not knowing what else to say. She turned slightly, enough for him to hear her whisper, "Are you hurt?" Evan shook his head. "I'm fine." She let out a breath of relief so quiet that only he could hear it. Turning back to the nobles, she said, "Leave now. All of you. This chamber is no longer under your control." The nobles hesitated, but one look at her eyes glowing cold behind the silver mask made them back away. They left the room slowly, their footsteps unsteady, their faces pale. When the door finally closed behind them, the princess's shoulders dropped. She breathed out hard, like she had been holding her breath for hours. Evan stepped closer. "Why did you come here?" She turned her masked face toward him, and for a moment, she seemed small. "Afraid, real, because I could not let them hurt you," she whispered. "Not you." Her voice broke on the last word. Evan's eyes softened. "You're not what they say you are." The princess lowered her head. "I know," she said quietly. "But they fear me anyway." The morning sun rose over Valoria with soft golden light, but inside the palace, everything felt tense. Rumors spread like wind through the halls. The princess protected the human. She entered the chamber of discipline. She spoke in his defense. Such things had never happened before. Palace workers whispered behind curtains. Guards exchanged nervous looks. Even the council chambers buzzed with confused voices. But the princess remained silent. She stood alone on her balcony, staring at the glowing city below. Her fingers moved slowly across the cold metal of her silver mask. Last night played again and again in her mind, the nobles striking Evan, the fear in her chest, the moment she stepped between him and danger. No one knew what it felt like to protect someone for the first time. No one knew what it felt like to hear someone protect her first. She remembered the shock in Evan's eyes when he asked, "Why did you come here?" His question still echoed in her heart. She whispered to herself, "Because you were not afraid of me." A soft knock at her door broke the silence. "Princess," a guard said from outside. "The High Council requests your presence in the Great Hall." She closed her eyes. She knew what this meant. The bonding ceremony would begin again, this time with all planets watching through live holograms. The Empire was desperate. They needed a bonded heir. They needed stability. She sighed, straightened her gown. and walked toward the hall. Evan Hall, meanwhile, stood outside the palace fountain, rubbing his sore cheek. He wasn't angry, just confused. He murmured to himself, "Why does this place act like a face decides everything?" A young palace messenger rushed over. "Human, the Great Hall summons all guests." "All guests? I'm not a suitor. You are a visitor. You must attend." Evan frowned. "All right, lead the way." As he walked through the halls, he noticed people staring. Some with fear. Some with curiosity. Some with anger. The strange part was, Evan didn't care. He had seen 1,000 planets, and each had strange customs. But Valoria's fear of their own princess felt deeply wrong. He remembered her soft voice in the chamber shaking. "But strong, because I could not let them hurt you." "Not you." Evan felt something tighten in his chest. Inside the great hall, giant white banners hung from the walls. Hundreds of nobles, guards, and guests filled the space. The long glowing platform in the center waited for the one person everyone feared and admired. A voice announced, "Her Highness, Princess Celeries of Valoria." The hall fell silent as the princess entered, her silver mask shining like a moon. She walked to the center of the platform with slow, graceful steps. The council elder raised his staff. "The bonding ceremony will begin. Suitors may step forward." Evan crossed his arms in the back of the hall. He whispered, "Why force a person to show their face just to earn love?" One suitor stepped forward, trembling. He looked at the princess, looked at the mask, and backed away before even speaking a word. The hall sighed. Another suitor stepped forward. Same result. The council elder frowned deeply. "Do none of you dare to wait for her face?" But everyone trembled. The princess swallowed, feeling the familiar stab of loneliness. She lowered her head. That was when it happened. A voice rang out across the hall. I stepped forward. Heads turned. Gasps filled the air. It was Evan. He walked calmly, confidently, hands loose at his sides. The nobles whispered in shock. Guards reached for weapons. The council stared wide-eyed. Evan stopped at the foot of the platform. The elder shouted, "Human! You cannot step forward without the princess revealing her face." Evan looked straight at the princess and said, "I choose her before I see her." The hall exploded with noise. Impossible. Unacceptable. He breaks the ancient law. He insults the ceremony. The princess froze. Her breath caught. Her heart pounded painfully in her chest. No one, not in 10 years, not in 100, had dared to say such words. The elder slammed his staff. "Human, you must first see her face." Evan shook his head. His voice was calm, but filled with quiet strength. "Her face does not matter. Her heart does. And I've already seen that." Silence fell like a blanket over the hall. The princess's fingers trembled. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, not as a mask, not as a curse, not as a burden, but as a person. Her voice came out soft, afraid, trembling. "Why would you choose me without seeing me?" Evan stepped closer, his eyes warm. "Because you came to save me," he said. "Because you stood alone when everyone turned away. Because you deserve someone who chooses you for who you are, not for a mask." The hall held its breath. The nobles stared in fear. The council stared in shock. And the princess stared at Evan like the world had shifted. Her hands rose slowly to her mask, for the first time with hope, not fear. The great hall felt frozen in time. Every glowing torch, every pair of eyes, every breath in the air seemed to stop the moment the princess lifted her trembling hands toward her silver mask. For 10 long years, no one had seen her real face. For 10 long years, the empire feared a curse that no one could prove. For 10 long years, the princess hid behind cold metal until a human broke the rule. Evan stood just below the platform, calm but determined, watching her with soft, steady eyes. His presence alone felt like a shield. The hall full of nobles, guards, and frightened suitors felt distant now. The princess swallowed hard. Her legs shook slightly. She had dreamed of this moment, feared this moment, hated this moment. She never imagined someone would stand before her willingly, without fear, without shaking. But Evan did. He didn't step back. He didn't lower his gaze. He didn't show fear. That gave her courage. With a slow breath, she lifted the mask. The metal glimmered as it moved upward, revealing her chin first, then her jaw, then her cheeks. Gasps spread through the hall like thunder. Evan stood completely still, watching, not judging. At last, the mask came off completely. The princess's face glowed softly under the hall lights. A beautiful mark shaped like a rising star spread across the left side of her face, glowing faintly like moonlight. It wasn't ugly. It wasn't frightening. It wasn't cursed. It was unique, gentle, strange, beautiful. But the people had feared it for years. The princess lowered her eyes, expecting screams, expecting rejection, expecting fear. She whispered, voice breaking, "Now you see the curse." Evan shook his head. "I see no curse." She looked up, surprised. He stepped closer. "It's just a mark. A symbol. Like a story written on your skin." Her lips parted slightly. No one had ever said such words. She felt warmth rising in her chest, new, fragile, overwhelming. But the hall behind them did not share his calm. "No!" One noble shouted. "This is madness. He breaks the ancient law." She must hide her face. "The empire will fall." The council elder yelled, "Princess Celeries, you must put the mask back on." The princess held the mask tightly in her hands, but she did not raise it to her face. For the first time, she whispered a single word that shook the hall. "No." The nobles staggered backward. The council stared as if lightning struck the floor. The guards did not dare move. Evan smiled faintly. "Good." Before she could answer, the tall noblewoman leader of the rebellion stepped forward, fury shaking her voice. "You were never meant to rule." She screamed. "Your face brings weakness. Your bond must fail." Then she gave a sharp signal, and chaos exploded. Dozens of hidden rebels rushed into the hall from side doors, pulling out energy blades and stun rifles. Gasps turned into screams. The glowing torches flickered wildly. The princess stepped back in shock. Evan instantly moved, placing himself between her and the rebels. Guards rushed forward. But the rebels were fast, striking hard and without hesitation. A beam shot toward the princess. Evan grabbed her wrist and pulled her aside just in time. "Stay behind me," he shouted. "I can help," she tried. "No. They're after you." He pushed her back toward the safety of the platform as a rebel lunged at him with a blade. Evan caught the attacker's arm, twisted it, and threw the man across the floor. Another rebel swung at him. Evan ducked and punched, sending him crashing into a pillar. The hall watched in shock. A human, a simple traitor, fighting like a warrior. But that was the truth about humans. They came from death worlds. Their bodies were tough. Their spirits even tougher. The princess watched with wide eyes, hands pressed to her chest. She had never seen anyone fight for her so fiercely. The attacking rebels kept coming. Evan's breath grew heavier, his arms tired. But his eyes never left her. A rebel aimed a rifle directly at the princess. Evan saw it. He sprinted across the floor, grabbed the princess, and shielded her with his own body as the beam fired. The blast hit Evan's back. The princess screamed, "Evan!" He collapsed to his knees, panting, pain burning through him, but he kept his arms around her, protecting her from the next shot. Guards finally overwhelmed the rebels, defeating them one by one. The noblewoman leader tried to flee but was caught by palace sentinels. The hall fell into silence except for heavy breathing and scattered cries. The princess cupped Evan's face with shaking hands. "You protected me, even when you were hurt." Evan gave a weak smile. "Of course. I chose you." Her tears fell freely, landing on his cheek. In the glowing silence that followed, the princess whispered, "You chose me before seeing my face. And now, even after seeing it, you still stay." Evan nodded. "Always." The great hall was a battlefield covered in broken crystal pieces, fallen banners, and sparks drifting from damaged lights. Smoke from the rebels' weapons floated in the air like thin gray clouds. Yet the only thing the princess saw was Evan kneeling on the floor, wounded but still trying to stand between her and danger. She held his shoulders tightly. His breath was heavy, but his eyes were steady, strong. His shirt burned at the back where the blast struck, but he didn't let go of her. "You're hurt," she whispered, tears falling. "I'll survive," Evan said with a weak smile. "Humans are tougher than we look." She shook her head, trembling. "You shouldn't have taken that hit for me." He looked directly into her eyes, voice soft but firm. "I would do it again." The princess felt her heart swell with something new, something warm, bright, and powerful. No suitor, no noble, no guard had ever shown her loyalty like this. Not because of the throne, not because of tradition, not because of fear, but because he cared. Guards rushed around them, securing the hall. The rebels were dragged away in chains. The tall noblewoman, furious even in defeat, shouted, "You ruined the empire. Her face is a curse. His bond will destroy us." The princess stood slowly, lifting her chin. For the first time, she faced her enemies without fear, without the mask, without hiding. Her voice was calm. "My face is not a curse. Your fear is." The hall quieted. Even the guards stared at her with wide eyes. They had never heard their princess speak with such power. She turned back to Evan, helping him stand. His legs shook slightly, but he did not fall. When she touched his arm, a warm light pulsed faintly between them, soft at first, then stronger. The council elder gasped. The bonding light. Everyone froze. This light was ancient, older than the throne, older than the palace. It appeared only when two souls connected willingly, without force, without fear. The princess looked down in shock. "What is happening?" Evan whispered, I think it's us." The light wrapped around their hands like gold threads. The air hummed gently, as if the hall itself was alive. The nobles backed away. Guards knelt without thinking. Even the council elder lowered his head. The elder spoke in a trembling voice. "The bonding ritual, completed on its own. This has not happened for centuries." The princess's heart raced. "But we didn't speak the vow." "The vow is spoken by the heart," the elder said softly. "You chose each other." The hall filled with soft whispers. A human bonded with the princess. The princess finally found her partner. The curse was never real. Perhaps the mark was a blessing. Evan looked at the princess, his voice gentle. "Do you accept this bond?" She hesitated, but only for a moment. Then she nodded. "I do." The golden light flared bright, rising toward the ceiling like a beam. The palace trembled not with fear, but with energy. The banners lifted as if caught in wind. The broken crystals glowed. Even the sky beyond the windows seemed brighter. When the light faded, their hands remained linked. And every person in the hall bowed, not because they were forced, not because they feared the princess, but because they saw the truth. Their future queen was strong, and she had found someone who made her stronger. The princess helped Evan walk toward the throne platform. He winced at the pain in his back, but he held her hand firmly. She whispered, "You saved my life." He smiled. "And you saved mine." The elder approached them slowly, staff trembling. "Princess Celeries, what are your orders?" She looked across the hall at the frightened nobles, the tired guards, the broken weapons, the rebels being taken away. And then she looked at Evan, the only one who never feared her. Her voice was steady as she said, "End the lies. End the fear. Let my face be seen by all. Let the people know the truth." The elder bowed. "As you command." "And," she added, turning to Evan, "no harm shall come to him, ever." A wave of relief washed through the hall. Even the guards seemed grateful. The frightened nobles knew the old ways had ended. Evan squeezed her hand. "You're stronger than you think." She looked at him with soft eyes. "Only because you showed me how." Outside the palace, the news spread like wildfire. The princess found her bond. The mask is gone. The empire has a future. A human saved Veloria. And as Evan and Princess Celeries walked side by side toward the rising light of dawn, it felt like the beginning of something bigger, something that would change two worlds forever. For the first time, the princess smiled openly, because someone had chosen her not for her face, but for her heart.